Yes, we're on the banks of the Kansas River. If you're not from Lawrence, right out your window is our beautiful river. Covers 61,000 square miles. The watershed is vast. Covers the upper half of Kansas almost, central Nebraska, eastern Colorado. Kind of crazy to think that if it rains in Lyman, Colorado, and we don't use it or divert it for some other purpose, that it'll roll right past the Spring Hill Suites. It's pretty neat to think about the highway of rivers we have. Nick's pulling up my PowerPoint. Great, thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'm here to talk to you this morning about Kansans for Conservation. And Kansans for Conservation is a coalition of organizations. There are a lot of nonprofits. There are for-profit businesses. There's a lot of different entities that are involved in it, and I'll share more about that with you. But we started this coalition back in 2017 because we saw a need for conservation funding in Kansas. To be honest, we were a little bit jealous of our friends in Missouri. And we thought, what can we do in Kansas to make sure that we have conservation dollars? So this is the United States of America, and you'll see the dark green. Those are constitutionally dedicated funding states. Kansas is right in the middle, and of course, Missouri, Nebraska, and Colorado all have conservation funding, and we do not. So last year, we estimate that there was 86 million in unfilled aid requests from Kansas producers. And we are among the last of our neighbors by an average of 102 million in land and water conservation fund receipts. So this is a little bit about where we've been. I mentioned in 2017. So I work for Friends of the Call. We're a member of the coalition, and in 2017, I got a phone call from Rob Manus, who at the time was the director for the state of Kansas with the Nature Conservancy. And he and Mike Beam, who's the current secretary for the Department of Agriculture in Kansas, they decided to pull as many conservation-minded people together to talk about conservation funding. And I remember this meeting. We met in Alma, Kansas. There were probably about 10 or so organizations represented that day. And we decided that we did all have this common desire to want to find conservation funding. So we started this coalition, and it was informal in 2017. In 2022, we incorporated as a 501c4 organization. Then in 2023, we used the coalition to support House Bill 2302, which was funding into the State Water Plan Fund. And if you want to know more about the State Water Plan Fund, I can talk to you about that as well afterwards. Then in 2024, we introduced our own bill. This was House Bill 2541. We held an advocacy day at the State House. We had a hearing on our bill. We had over 40 proponents for the bill hearing, and we hosted a legislative session. This was a huge milestone for us. If any of you were in the State House that day, how wonderful it was to see all of these people together talking about conservation from 2017 to 2024. I remember the first conversations, I thought, wow, this is a heavy lift. And here we are, at least with our own bill. So today we have 39 member organizations, and we are mobilizing for 2025. We call this the NASCAR slide. No joke, that's what we refer to it as. These are all of the organizations that currently are signed on as coalition members. And you'll see that Kansas Farmers Union is right up at the top. My nonprofit, Friends of the Caw, I saw that Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams is here today. Lots of different organizations supporting the coalition. So here's what we pledge. No new government. We're going to utilize the existing structure to the greatest extent possible with minimal growth. That's what we heard from the legislature that they would like to see. So we have made sure that our bill includes no new government, no new taxes or fees, redirecting budget surpluses, inefficiencies, or conservation-related dollars. And we've heard streamlined funding, move dollars from the state to on-the-ground conservation as efficiently as possible. We've heard the same thing about the state water plan. The legislature wants to see programs that are streamlined and more efficient. So this is what we are proposing in our bill. So we have our funding sources, and they'll come into a conservation fund. And right now, the way it's laid out, working lands would get 50% of the dollars into the conservation fund. 25% goes to park and recreation, which I think we've rebranded as Kansas Outdoors. And then 25% to wildlife projects. Oh, did I miss a slide? I don't see it on there. Okay, I'll speak from this. So there's, the way that we have it laid out is that the wildlife portion would go to Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. It would be, have an oversight by the commission, and the funds would be distributed through that agency. Working lands, the funds would go to the Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Conservation. And those funds would have an oversight by the State Conservation Commission. Parks and Recreation would go into the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks with oversight by the Recreational Advisory Board. And then the entities which are eligible to apply for these funds are states, the state, municipalities, cities, counties, nonprofits. And then those dollars, like the working land dollars, would then be put out towards the working lands. Okay? So let's talk about how you can get involved, and we're happy to share the bill. We have draft now of the bill information. In fact, I brought a copy with me if anyone wants to see it, and if you want to read it in more detail. But I want you to get our contact information so that you can learn more. Kansansforconservation.org. And here's how you can get involved. Go to the Take Action page. You can subscribe to get updates. You can add your support via our website. You can join the coalition as an organizational member. You can donate, because all of these things cost money. And you can watch for updates for our Day at the Capitol, which is scheduled for February 25th, 2025. So we're really excited about the path that we're on right now. We feel good about our bill. Last year, when we had our hearing, we got a lot of feedback from legislators, and we incorporated that feedback into the new bill, and we're ready to go back in 2025. And so we're hoping for some good movement, but I can tell you from working for over a decade on the state water plan funding, it takes time. But every year that you go back and you continue to talk about how important these things are to the people and to our natural resources, the more that they learn about how important this is, and over time, they learn more and they want to support it. And so we found that the squeaky wheel, it really does get the grease. So I hope that you'll all squeak with us and talk about conservation this year in the legislature. And with that, any questions? Yeah. Is there time for questions?
Yeah,
okay.
Time. Andrea?
With the working lands funding, is that, can you explain that a little bit more? How, is it something that farmers would be able to apply for working land funding, or is that funding just for the Department of Agriculture?
No, it's not just for the Department of Agriculture. So the funds would go into the State Division of Conservation, and they would administer the program. It's a grant program. And then organizations can apply for those dollars and then put those dollars on the ground. So for example, I'm going to find the list so that I don't mess it up. I'm actually reading the bill, so here it is. Okay. So for that section, eligible grant applications, public entities but not limited to state agencies, municipalities, counties, state or federally recognized tribal nations, conservation districts, special park and recreation districts, recreation commissions, and nonprofit entities shall be eligible to receive funding from the grant program. Eligible grant applications shall benefit the natural resources of the state by promoting conservation on working lands through practices including but not limited to irrigation efficiency, grazing land management, voluntary conservation agreements, soil health practices, practices that promote or regenerate soil ecosystems, biodiversity, and native grasslands, management of woody encroachment, sustainable and regenerative timber management, ecological restoration of lands, enhanced water quality or quantity, relevant educational programs, resources, and services for adults and youth.
Okay, so the working lands funding does not go directly to farmers for water conservation practices. It goes to organizations or municipalities educating farmers.
It goes to organizations that then can give it to farmers. So like if a nonprofit, let's say Kansas Alliance for Wetlands and Streams, who works with landowners, if they wanted to apply for working lands dollars to implement irrigation efficiency or buffers or something, they could apply for funding and then distribute it to the farmers.
So it can be re-granted?
It can be re-granted, yeah.
Why doesn't it just go to producers?
I think it's because they're concerned about the ability for them to handle the amount of grant applications for one, but also look at all of these organizations on the list. They also want to be able to use these programs to implement their conservation initiatives. Mary?
Could you speak?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you speak about the ability to use this money for buying lands, not buying land? Who can do that with this?
Right, this funding will not be used, allowed to be used to buy land. It also will not, there's a huge, last year in the State House, we got a lot of pushback on the 30 by 30 initiative, and so one of the changes that was made to this bill in the 2025 draft version says that there's no mandatory, let's see, how did they phrase it? No, everything is voluntary. So it's voluntary practices, yeah. But no, there's nothing in here that says that you can use the funds to purchase land. In fact, the state of Kansas is specifically prohibited from purchasing lands.
Okay, but private organizations can apply for funding to do that if they want.
They can apply for funding for the programs, but I don't believe they can buy land, right?
I'm
Yeah.
not of the understanding that they can use those funds to buy land.
Oh, I was told that, well, at the meeting, someone was saying that it's just that state agencies can't do that, but other private organizations can apply.
I don't recall that, but I'd be more than happy to maybe write that down, Nick. More than happy to find out for sure. Because if we're wrong, we would want to know that. Yeah. Mary?
Does the coalition have an estimate of how much money, what size the funds will be that get allocated or dedicated to this? Because it seems kind of vague if you say no new taxes or fees, but simply glean the money from inefficiencies or surplus.
Remember when I said there was a slide that was missing from this slide deck? It said $60 million. Anyone else have a question?
Don't
Yes,
some of these
sir.
organizations work together, like the Milford Blue-Green Algae, that, you know, through the soil conservation, that there was different organizations that help sponsor that too? Would that been one of the programs possibly, if funding was available?
The
and
Milford
directed to-
Blue-Green Algae?
Yeah, it's a phosphorus deal
Right.
that promoted the Milford watershed area.
Well, do you notice that we don't talk a lot about water in the conservation program? And that's because all of those types of activities are funded through the State Water Plan Fund.
Right.
So I think the idea is that those specific programs, that specific blue-green algae program continues through the State Water Plan program. But if you're talking about land.
Some of these organizations worked with that then also,
Mhm.
you know, like.
Right,
done
some of them
something
do.
with other things too.
But also, I mean, you could argue, because we've said this, you know, the working lands piece benefits water quality.
Right.
And so if you have a land conservation practice that would impact Milford,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Any other
Was there
questions
another
for
question? Okay, I will stick around if anyone wants to see the bill or ask any more questions. And then also if you have any questions about water, I can ask those as well, answer those as well.
Don?